Hi. The title of this talk was Trustless Credibility. And I'll talk a little bit about that, but I'm going to kind of address the spectrum of things kind of lightly. And some of it will be kind of abstract, so if it seems like confusing and nerdy, don't worry, examples are following shortly. And if something is boring, don't worry, a change of topic is probably fine. So, fear not. I'd like to start at the beginning. I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1989, and I'm Jewish, I come from a Jewish family, and there are not a lot of Jews there. So you used to be able to write Jew, Ohio on an envelope and it would show up in my house. Credit to Jerry Seinfeld, another Jew, for that joke. Can't take credit. But don't know where I was going with that. Anyway, I was, kind of a weird kid, like I still am now, and I was always getting rejected by the girls that I had crushes on. In like elementary school, I started early. Elementary school, middle school. So like by the time I was 13, more than half my life had been in a state of romantic frustration and unrequited love and just pain. And so the internet was a thing at the time. It was starting to become more of a thing. And so I started to solve this problem in the way that nerds do, by like studying and figuring it out. So I started to go online and go, what makes girls like you? How to be attractive and stuff like that. And found what later came to be called the seduction community. And
I think this talk was going this way.
Are you Neil Strauss?
I have way more hair than Neil Strauss. How dare you? So, what happened then? So, sidebar. One of the girls that I ended up practicing flirting on, like in an AOL chat setting, is currently my wife.
Oh.
So,
It works.
I don't know. Yeah. Long story. But one of there's a spectrum of like influences in the seduction community, ranging from the famous seedy ones to the ones that kind of end up being a pipeline to spirituality. Instead of going like, all right, what are the pickup lines? What are like the psychological tricks and stuff like that? It goes to what's actually the source of attractiveness? What is like authenticity and honesty, and what makes a good man good? What are women picking up on with their incredible radar for things that men are just going input, output, I don't like this. And like trying to find the perfect like words to say. So there's like the shallow stuff and the deep stuff, and my first day in a new high school, Radnor High School actually, down the street from Villanova, I was still in the shallow stuff. So on my first day, I knew nobody. I got like 10 phone numbers and made no friends, and I had nothing in here to back it up. So I immediately was just like, oh, that's the guy who pretended to be super suave on the first day of school, but he's faking it. And so like I was a lonely high schooler because it was just transparent that I had nothing in here really going on. So that brought me over to like the more introspective kind of things. And one of the books that David D'Angelo, if anyone knows that name, recommended was Radical Honesty by Brad Blanton. And Radical Honesty is written by a psychologist who recommends being completely honest all the time about like all your deepest weird thoughts and stuff like that, as a matter of like intimacy and courage and just kind of clearing out your own BS and kind of living with the sort of level of integrity. And I started to experiment with that at school. And I would be, doing something mischievous, and I would get caught, and I would say to the person who caught me, oh, I didn't think you were going to be here.
I didn't know I couldn't be there.
I didn't say that. I said, I didn't think you were going to be here. I was doing this mischievous thing, And if you hadn't been here, I was going to go to this other mistress. And when I would do that, what happened was the situation would resolve itself in a far more harmonious way than I could have contrived. And I was an atheist at the time, but it gave me this sort of tactile sense of truth being a force. Truth is a force. If I cooperate and serve it, like the whole universe conspires to return the favor and work with me. And so I had like this sense of this, and it didn't strike me as supernatural or anything at the time. But it gave me a kind of felt trust in truth that it started to inform just kind of everything. And I mentioned I was an atheist, but over the next few years, I continued to trust truth enough to eventually say, if there is a God, I am willing to know. I don't care what the truth is. I just want to know what it is. If I'm wrong, fine. I just want to know. Because I trust at this point that truth will take care of it. Truth will take care of it. It won't hurt. It won't mess me up. If it hurts, it'll be worth it. It'll be okay. So I built up this trust in truth. And when I said that prayer, little coincidences started happening to like, maybe there's like a spiritual thing going on here. I would meet people kind of randomly. Synchronicities, extremely unlikely things that seemed like directly, ordered to communicate something specific to me kept happening. And I was just kind of very gently led into exploring like the spectrum between like quantum mechanics and Buddhist spirituality and stuff like that. And I started to, read these stories of people who had experiences that gave them, infinite perpetual bliss. And I was like, that sounds ideal. And, you can still get chicks. You just don't, you're not bothered so much. And so I started to like experiment with meditation, and I had this experience that just went and gave me like a felt sense of something non-physical extending out from into beyond the body. And I just sat there kind of going, like breathing. And as I'm breathing, like the room is breathing too. And it's completely on the natch. I'm not like on drugs or nothing. And I went, oh, okay, there's definitely something here. And so I started to do this 180 on my atheism and went completely around and was like, yeah, God is real. This is all real. The spiritual world is real. It's all here. And I was so kind of embarrassed by this that I didn't even use the word God for like years. I was saying consciousness, the universe. I was talking like one of those hippie people. Deepak Chopra type people. And when I got all syllabled out, I started using God as a shorthand. And so why did I share all that? A couple years later, in my early 20s, I got out of a relationship that had really been toxic. And we went into it with the best of intentions, and I don't blame anybody, but I ended up valuing this relationship so much that I was dishonest in order to stay in it. I became a liar because I just didn't want to face whatever kinds of pain and consequences would come from breaking up with this person. And being a liar eventually caught up and ruined me. And I had this huge crisis, and I felt irrevocably distant from God for a long time, and I just couldn't reason my way out of it, couldn't meditate my way out of it. I prayed to every deity there is, and nothing seemed to work. I was just in complete despair. And there was nothing I could do about it. I was just in despair. My attitude was, even though I know all this stuff about truth and God, I abandoned it, I'm screwed forever, and I might as well enjoy this life because I'm not going to enjoy the afterlife. And it took me a while to get to that point of like resignation. And then I started just trying to enjoy things a little bit and just feel better and have a nice life. And I discovered Reddit around this time. It's 2013, 14, 15 maybe. And I had a lot of pent-up frustration with my ex, because I felt like I was right about certain things and I couldn't convince her. And because I couldn't convince her, I let her convince me, and I blew up my life. And I was just kind of mad and frustrated, like why I couldn't convince her. And as a sort of self-therapy thing, I started doing research on underappreciated truths, just things that I could make a really solid case for that you can't find a lot of mainstream support for. And I would make a solid case, and I would post it on Reddit and just try to convert people, because I can't convince my ex-girlfriend of whatever that was, but I can make you believe in UFOs.
Confirmed real.
Yeah, where's my mind? So I was doing that, and it was purely self-interested. It was purely just like trying to make myself feel better. But that hobby kind of gave me this sense of the vast gap between common knowledge and the best knowledge. And given that we have the internet, there's not a reason for there to be this big gap. We possess all the best knowledge in the world because we have it. It's there. It's not an access problem. It's not a discovery problem. It's not even really a science problem. It's an attention allocation problem. It's a credibility allocation problem. It's a trust allocation problem. Are the people that we trust to help us interpret the world and decide what's true and decide what matters doing as good a job as they could? And most people don't frame it like that. Most people are pretty fed up with the people whose job that is. The government, the corporate media, the university system, all kinds of NGOs and medical overlords these days. And I was frustrated by that. Fast forward a little bit, I fell into the crypto space by accident. I was looking for remote jobs, and I got one doing operations for a crypto startup in 2017 or something like that. And I didn't know anything about the space. I was just looking for a job. It was cool. And I learned about the industry over that 6 months or whatever. And it was very interesting. I could see the value of building like alternate, systems for things that are resilient in a way and don't depend on the legacy systems and blah, blah, blah. And incentive design, the incentive like Tinker Toys, where we can build things and make people cooperate in different ways. And so I started thinking, well, how can we start closing this gap between the world's best knowledge and what we call common knowledge? And my foray into crypto was my first experience of the finance world really at all. I hadn't worked in finance, I hadn't done any personal investing really. It was just an area of life that I never really cared that much about. And so when I got into crypto, everyone's making all this money. I started to learn things. I went on the weird circles of the internet, 4chan and stuff like that, because in these chaotic, anonymous places, the best information often arrives first, earliest. And if you can sort through BS, which I now had lots of practice doing,
Nice.
then you can find some real gems and stuff. So I was on 4chan, and it gradually occurred to me that everybody was saying, show me this, show me that, tell me what I'm missing, tell me what's the best thing in the world that nobody knows about. And I went, these are all the same questions I want people to ask about UFOs and about God and about free energy and stuff like that. So my first experience with markets was markets scale curiosity. They make people care about getting the world's best information on a thing when ordinarily they wouldn't care. So I think a seed was planted around that time to see if we could use markets to create curiosity about everything, not just things for which there were existing assets. I noodled on that for a while and kind of had the glancingest of encounters with the work of Nassim Taleb who I've not read any of his books. Let me just put that right on the cover there. I've not read any of his books. But a quote came across my desk that changed my professional life. And what he said was, rationality is risk management. And I went, oh, that sounds kind of like markets and truth. There's like something there. And what I liked about that was it starts with the humble outlook. Rationality as risk management is not, here are the facts, you must believe them or be an outcast. There's a lot of certainty embedded in the language that we use about truth at every level of society, even the scientists who are founded on this idea of tentative knowledge. So I'm kind of angry at the scientific world because knowledge is tentative, we're just doing the best we can, is supposed to be like their unifying principle, while at the same time, as Max Planck pointed out, who won a Nobel Prize in Einstein's time when the competition was actually hot, he said science progresses one funeral at a time. Meaning that the way progress happens is the people who believed the old thing die, and the younger people replace them and make their ideas more prominent. And I'm thinking, come on, is that really the best iteration rate we can get out of the institutions that are supposed to give us the best information in the world in the internet age? So the first thing I wanted to try to do with Ideamarket, or the thing that became Ideamarket, was build a NASDAQ-style market for anticipating who would deserve public trust, who would earn public trust. Because Joe Rogan has more viewers than CNN, but Joe Rogan isn't a Wall Street corporation, so you can't really compare them in any meaningful way. And even if you could, profitability is the metric by which we measure corporations, and it's not the metric by which we measure intellectuals or influencers or whatever, however you want to call it. So the first product for Ideamarket was like NASDAQ for Twitter accounts. Everybody, all the Twitter accounts you could put on chain, and there was a bonding curve token associated with each one so that you can buy the ones that you think will go up, and if you change your mind, you can sell them, and blah, blah, blah. And if anyone's heard of BitClout, it was kind of like BitClout, but better and earlier. So. Anyway, that was cool. It had a couple of problems. One was Ethereum Layer 1 was the chain that we used for it, and the gas fees were so high in February 2021 that it was minimum $50 per transaction no matter who you are. And that's not really tenable, especially if you're trading and like the little marginal things count. So we spent the better part of that year transitioning to Arbitrum, which we did, and then we encountered the next problem, which was that the incentives were not very well designed, in the sense that I had intended to reduce risk for the early comers so that it would be easy for momentum to build. The problem was we reduced it so much that no one wanted to be a latecomer. No one wanted to follow on and buy after someone else because it was too easy for them to get rugged. So we were kind of at an incentive like stuck point, and it was already completely built and launched, and what are you going to do? The thing that made me want to kind of switch the product was when I imagined its success. When I imagined, all right, we got $10 billion flowing through this every day. Well, then what? Then me and my little team are somehow responsible implicitly for all this $10 billion. And yeah, it's a protocol and all that, but if something goes wrong, it's, it was precarious, even in the best scenario, even in the ideal scenario. So I wanted to switch to a product that involved no financial risk, but basically accomplished the same goal. I feel like I'm getting kind of technical, so I'm going to take a little break and backtrack a little bit. There's a TV show right now out there called The Chosen, and it's telling the story of the ministry of Jesus Christ and his early Jewish followers, the 12 apostles. And it's really well done. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. And there's a scene in there that is not at all scriptural, but hit me really hard anyway. And the scene is Matthew, the future apostle Matthew, is a tax collector, and he's a smart, kind of quirky guy in the show. And he's being kind of interrogated by Quintus, the praetor of Capernaum, the kind of like the governor of the city. And he just kills people whenever he feels like it. He's a dangerous guy. But Quintus has a meeting coming up, and he wants to impress the person that he's going to meet with. And he goes, Matthew, I have this important meeting coming up. How do I show him that I'm a good governor? How do I impress him? And Matthew says, he immediately says, I would show him my plans for infrastructure. And he goes, why? He says, well, conquering, like Rome does, isn't just about conquering new lands. It's about imposing a new way of life. And I went, What he's saying, kind of, there's some parallels here with what you were saying earlier, Paul, that like the wagon box used to be like a cowboy place, and that's cool, but it's not you. You want to build an institution that reflects you. You are, in a sense, imposing a way of life via the infrastructure. And I think this is a relatively effective way to be persuasive. This is why, instead of like writing a bunch of papers and trying to argue that we should think about rationality like risk management and like build all these things, I built the thing because it's hard to get everyone to agree with you, even if you're a genius and you can make it simple. But if you can get everyone to use a thing that is based on your assumptions, and then through their behavior, they start taking on your assumptions. Through their behavior, they kind of buy into the metaphor. And so building products can be a way to persuade people without the hassle of persuading people. It's like infrastructure is philosophy made visible. If you can get people using a thing, you get people buying into whatever premises designed it. Let's see. Are there any like burning questions or points of interest or points of confusion or points of abject boredom? I'd just be interested to hear any reaction. Okay.
I mean, I was there pretty much alongside it for most of the thing.
Yeah.
And I think you have this tagline that is so memorable that I don't remember it, but I would like you to say it about it has the word truth and opinion or fact in it, right? And this was kind of your philosophy for why you designed it.
We trust?
What was it? Something about like there are no facts.
Oh yeah. Okay, so I wrote a little thing. I guess this is important. Hang on. All right. So one of the problems with modern epistemology is we're building it around certainties, like I mentioned earlier. And one of the ways that we do that is we use the word fact all the time. And the word fact implies like an atomicity, a solidness and a certainty that's not ever justified. And whatever comes to be regarded as a fact, like the earth is round, the earth is flat, depends on who you ask. Whatever gets regarded as a fact is the product of somebody's judgment about it. Somebody has decided I, the fact arbiter, am confident enough about a thing that no further questions or doubts are required. I feel comfortable risking my life or whatever to never question this again and treat it as solid. When we start using the word fact, we start making that decision on behalf of others. We start making that risk management decision on behalf of others. We start taking an uncertainty management decision that we've made for ourselves and imply that there's no other possible position. And so just the notion of facts has some kind of tyranny built into it. And if this group of people has this set of facts and that group of people has that set of facts, then as Alexandros Marinos said, great guy on Twitter, he said that reduces epistemology to power. Because when it's a battle of whose set of facts wins, then the one that overpowers the other becomes the dominant thing. History is written by the winners. Yeah.
And to add to that, there was like the early progenitors and the creators of the internet, the early visionaries in Xerox PARC in Southern California, had this optimistic view that when we decentralize and we spread all the information around the world, we're going to see convergence. Everyone's going to arrive to the same truths, and we are all going to agree on things. And like it just, to them, it made sense. The direction this is going is that given all the information, people will converge to truth and these facts. And what we saw instead was the polar opposite, which is ultimate divergence. You now have a million different ways to see the world. You can piece together a tapestry of reality, your own version of facts with all this information. And it was almost exactly the opposite of what they had hoped for. And because, just to speak on like the last 20 years, because of that, what we've seen in my lifetime is a crazy divergence of this concept of facts. Because the power went to the people, it's kind of like the Protestant Reformation. You let everyone read the Bible in vernacular, and you got some very wonky, out there, down the rabbit hole interpretations, because it was all sprayed.
Yeah. And I completely agree with all of that, and weirdly share the optimism of the people who initially said there should be a convergence. Because I think the first thing that happened is the decentralization created a void. It created this new freedom that everybody had and didn't know how to use. And how could we? And so in our confusion, it became very easy to manipulate us. If epistemology is a matter of power, then the powerful can take advantage very easily. And our divergence, I think, also has been engineered. If you look at the COVID propaganda or the climate change propaganda or the atheism propaganda, or insert whatever propaganda you want here, there are infrastructure is philosophy made visible. There's infrastructure in place to make truth more expensive personally. There's infrastructure in place to make it more painful and difficult to seek truth. And this is a propaganda tool. It's not about keeping the information private because they can't. It's not about hiding it because they can't. It's about making it undesirable. And the way they do that mostly, and I'm not merely rambling here. I'm really glad you brought this up because this is an area I wanted to talk about. Is one of the main ways they make truth undesirable is through status and fashion. Status and fashion, elevate something and make people want to imitate it, and ridicule and shunning make something unpopular, make people want to avoid being associated with it. So just by creating status dynamics, you kind of shift the playing field. You add a sort of gravitational pull to the playing field toward a predetermined conclusion. So in a very real way, in my opinion, status is an enemy, a direct enemy of truth, because we all kind of can't help but care about it. We all want to think highly of ourselves. We all want to get good jobs. We all want to be, influencers or something. We all want to be respected. We don't want our families to shun us at Thanksgiving. We don't want to get attacked by anybody. We don't want to feel spat on or ashamed. We don't want to lose our jobs if we don't get the vaccine. We can't help but care about status. And the extent to which we override our innate caring for status through caring for truth is a large part of the extent to which we can find truth. Because if we don't want it, it doesn't matter if it's right here.
That can be dangerous in a certain sort of a way, though.
What can?
That can be dangerous as well, because, as I was saying, people do need to have some concern for their social status.
Yeah.
And they want to have some sort of good social status.
Yeah.
So you can almost fall into a psychological complex where you're using your sense of caring about truth as a way of essentially having a coping mechanism for your own social failure.
Sure, absolutely.
And that can prevent you from actually seeing the truth because you wind up stuck in a feedback loop where, like, I have already found it, I've already figured it out, and I'm quite pleased with myself.
Yeah, right. You're absolutely right. I think the implication I'm leaning toward here is the powers that be make the high status truth high status. They make that one obvious. The COVID vaccine's totally going to work. One shot and we're done. They make it big and loud. You're a conspiracy theorist if you think X. But it's the unpopular truths, the ones that get shunned, that deserve the most attention first. Just like on 4chan. Not that you have to sell your house based on what some anonymous person says. But like in crypto trading, the best information comes from the lowest status sources first. And now kind of transitioning a little bit toward more of the topic of this conference with respect to organizing groups of people and kind of social protocols. I'm interested in social protocols because they don't always require tech. For example, AA, don't worry, I'll tie this all together. AA is just like a series of traditions and behaviors that people voluntarily subject themselves to and obey. And it self-replicates, and it serves a function, and it doesn't bother anybody. And there's no central authority governing it, and there's not really too much abuse to speak of either. And all they do is they say, we have these rules, we do it this way. And with respect to status and truth, I find a Christianity to have instituted a social protocol to fight against this status temptation. Jesus was always saying, the world will hate you. The lowest, seek to humble yourself, don't care about what, men think and stuff like that. So there's kind of an inbuilt antidote to propaganda within Christianity. At least as it seems like it's designed. So if you can kind of combine Christianity with AA, you kind of create a self-perpetuating group that values truth really highly. And I'm kind of wondering if that means some form of epistemic monasticism. Because monks live together and they have a shared set of commitments. They say, we're going to love God, we're going to love Christ, we're going to love each other. We're not going to own any personal property. The monastery might have $10 million, but it's not mine. And if Friar Fred makes me mad, I forgive him. And if I make Friar Fred mad, he forgives me. But meanwhile, we try not to do that to each other. There's kind of a built-in, it's our job to suffer on each other's behalf. And so once we, when we put that onto ourselves, the outside governance kind of plummets because we don't need to be babysat so much. So there are monks who focus on charity and doing outreach like Mother Teresa's Sisters of Charity. And there are monks who focus on prayer and contemplation. And I wonder if there is room for a monastic order that focuses on intellectual humility and kind of goes around embarrassing themselves for Christ, or goes around trusting the force of truth to be stronger than the lure of propaganda. And I don't have this fleshed out at all. It's not even an ambition. It's just kind of a confluence of things that I've been thinking about. And I would not. I'm not trying to start a monastic order. But the idea of social protocols, I just think there's a lot of convergences here. I have a couple other notes that I wanted to comment on. I know I promised not to ramble, and I mostly rambled. So, how are we doing?
Doing good.
Good. Okay.
I'm digging it.
Awesome. Thank you. Whose face is on that coin? Yeah, okay. So, I'm just going to share a couple other observations and then maybe some crazy startup ideas. Next one. Cool, thank you.
Okay. Take a second and I'll turn it
Okay, that's fine. So I was talking earlier about facts actually being the product of decisions. But it's kind of more than that, because I could decide that something is a fact. That doesn't mean CNN is going to say it's a fact. So a fact is a product of decisions, but it's a product of trusted decisions, of protected, elevated decisions. Humans are all created equal, but the fact arbiters are some other species. And this is actually in Facebook's, a lawsuit that they were in. They got caught censoring something or something like that, and part of their defense was XYZ constitutes protected opinion. It's not that this is, they're arguing that this isn't fact, they're arguing it's protected opinion. So when the metal really hits the road, or whatever the metaphor is, in legal settings, fact devolves into opinion, because your only defense is to acknowledge this flaw in epistemology. Rachel Maddow did the same thing. She was accused of promoting factually untrue things. And the defense was something like, you can't expect facts from me, these are opinions. Don't quote me on that, I don't remember the details of the case. But I just think it's interesting that the secret assumptions underneath factual certainty come out when pressure is applied. So, facts are about trust and decisions, and the world kind of runs on decisions. There's been a lot of, rightly, ambition for world peace for forever. There's been, people try to, make war go away, and why shouldn't they? That's a good idea. And I think there's kind of my old mentor used to say, you can stop a train with one finger if you know where the button is. And I think there's a button on the world peace problem that hasn't been addressed too super much. And that is, in order for war to end immediately, and this is kind of maybe a bombastic thing to say, don't judge me, I'm just arrogant. In order for war to end completely, just everybody has to decide not to kill anybody. Yeah, just everybody goes, I simply won't do that anymore. The hard part is just getting everybody to make that decision. But it's actually an instant thing. There's nothing literally stopping us from making that decision. So since such, magnificent goals are merely a decision away, the importance of persuasiveness and persuasion takes on a central role. Because if you're able to persuade people to make a decision that ends war, that's valuable. Then you don't have to police them and force them to blah, 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 and just dismantle all their this and that. You can just get people to say, no, thank you. So persuasiveness is really important. And this is why I brought that up. There have been many wars. I've only heard of one that was won without violence, and that was the Indian War of Independence, waged by General Mahatma Gandhi, who was he used the force of truth that I alluded to earlier to convince the Imperial British to leave India. And one of the ways I know he used the force of truth to convince Imperial British to leave India is he called his autobiography "The Story of My Experiments with Truth." He was not like an activist, he was not a lawyer, he was not like bargainer. He was experimenting with truth as a force, as something to harness like a ship might harness wind in order to accomplish a goal that could only be accomplished that way. And he succeeded. And so I actually fell in love with Gandhi way before I fell in love with Jesus. But one of the reasons I fell in love with Jesus is the resemblance that Gandhi has to how Jesus acted. And I'm going to share a couple of things here. I'll come back to that image later. Sorry, this is my frustration about best knowledge versus common knowledge. Tesla invented this wireless light bulb in 1899. This is wireless electricity in 2021. What happened in the middle? Can anybody explain that? Why over 122 years, a critical piece of technology has evolved backwards and nobody seems to care? That's my frustration. Anyways,
Because they screwed over Tesla and Thomas Edison was a crook.
yeah, but why doesn't anybody care enough over 100 years to just build more Tesla shit in their garage and raise VC money? Why isn't Mark Andreessen all over the weirdos on rexresearch.com? Look it up. All right, sorry. I'm passionate. Okay, so back to Gandhi and Jesus. Here's how Gandhi described his tactics for fighting the British Empire. The nonviolence of my conception is more active in the real fight against wickedness than retaliation is, whose very nature is to increase wickedness. I contemplate a mental and therefore a moral opposition to immorality. I seek entirely to blunt the edge of the tyrant's sword, not by putting it up against a sharper edged weapon, but by disappointing his expectation that I would be offering physical resistance, turning the other cheek. The resistance of the soul that I should offer would elude him. It would at first dazzle him and at last compel recognition, which recognition would not humiliate but uplift him. So he's talking about turning the other cheek as a technology to apply at scale, as a persuasion technology. World peace, just decide not to kill anybody. It's a really good persuasion technology here. And here's, you guys have probably heard a little bit about Rene Girard on Twitter circulating around. Here's a quote from Girard describing how Jesus fought Satan, without any mention of Gandhi in the entire book. This is from I See Satan Fall Like Lightning. Christ does not achieve his victory through violence. He obtains it through a renunciation of violence so complete that violence can rage to its heart's content without realizing that by so doing it reveals what it must conceal. So Gandhi said, if I let him hit me and don't retaliate in any way, he will realize that what he's doing is stupid. It reveals the absurdity of the immoral action. It reveals the absurdity of the violence that would appear legitimate if he just fought back. And Jesus apparently did the same thing, according to Girard. And then Gandhi also commented on Jesus in turn somewhere else. And he said, "What would not I have given to be able to bow my head before the living image of Christ crucified? I saw there at once that nations, like individuals, could only be made through the agony of the cross and in no other way. Joy comes not out of infliction of pain on others, but out of pain voluntarily borne by oneself."
It's a deeply Christian sentiment.
It is.
I'd never heard that Gandhi made comments on Christianity.
Yeah. So, I think Gandhi is kind of a good modern proof of the Catholic theology of suffering as having redemptive value that we can kind of look at in a modern context and operationalize. And Gandhi really did operationalize it. He came up with a way to spread this philosophy and practice it among his kinsmen, so that he's not the only one. It's not him personally alone. It's that he led people in this style of warfare, and they succeeded. He protocolized it. He AA'd it. He Alcoholics Anonymous did. So Gandhi came up with rules that allowed people to imitate Christ and exorcise the British Empire from India peacefully. And I just think that's incredibly cool. The end. What about the startup? The startup.
Startup
Startup I did. Okay, I promise you. Okay, I'm leaving that up there just because I love it. So Ideamarket ran out of money, so I'm kind of between things, and one of the things I'm considering doing is a venture studio for epistemic experiments. Experiments in finding truth together, because we have this internet thing. It's really good for communicating fast and voluminously, but we don't have any products that are necessarily for deciding what's true together. And I think there's a lot of experimentation left to do with that. The niche might be called collective intelligence or something like that. There are lots of, people realize that this is a big problem that needs to be solved, but they're still kind of doing it along the fact-oriented way. So I'm gonna play around. These are mostly just silly, but one of the startups I would do in a venture studio, and what I imagine for this is we basically spend 50 to 100K per product building a little MVP to see if it flew. So it's kind of like product as performance art with a deep philosophical point that is not important for the end user. And when it flies, or if it flies, we can spin it off and hire a CEO and just let it fly. But we just want to blow open the industry of epistemic experimentation because it's not really there. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit. Let's just pick it. Let's just goof off and kind of expand the imagination on it. So one of the things I want to do is start a company to settle online arguments. Everyone's having debates. This would just be like a silly, you pay $50, you pay $50, and I will just decide. Like I spun up a landing page for it, and I said, pay $50, and I will decide who won your stupid argument.
It's third-party verification. It's like an auditor.
Yeah, right. And who am I? Who cares? But nobody did it. But I think there will be creative, interesting ways to make it fun, to make it to kind of come up with sets of criteria and ways of picking judges, or your friends can judge whatever that would make something like this potentially feasible, and it would just be kind of a fun epistemic experiment. Another thing I want to do is what I call quantified epistemology. You've heard of quantified self, where you're like, oh right, I'm just gonna have this diet and I'll look at my Fitbit and just log everything, and then I'll eat one more orange on Tuesdays and see how it helps, and just kind of like iterate on little things. Well, I want to have people wear a Fitbit and change nothing about their lifestyle except a cherished belief.
I love it.
That's another thing I want to play with. I want to build you can use blockchain for this. I want to build a credentialing system for psychics. Psychic abilities are real. You can adapt provably fair crypto casino smart contracts to create tests for psychic abilities. And then when people do unusually well, it'll be on chain. And then you know who that is. And then you can approach them and say, talk to my father for me, he's dead, or something like that. You can start creating, Fivers or something like that. And the reason I want to do that, I actually don't think it's good for you to consult psychics. It's a sin in the Catholic Church, and I would never encourage it. However,
It does work.
However, it's one of those places where the scientific world refuses to look at the evidence. And it's another place where you can see status versus truth at play. Because the scientific consensus on psychic abilities is that they don't exist. But if you ask the scientists who study it, it does. But they are called pseudoscientists. Their status is attacked. The evidence isn't even really dealt with. And if you associate with them or affirm them or anything like that, it ruins your reputation. So there you can see status being weaponized against truth. So anyway, talking to psychics is a sin, don't do it. But if we're going to poke a hole in the materialist paradigm, I think monetizing psychic abilities would be a way to kind of do that. Lubricate that. I'd like to figure out how to do stupidity insurance.
There's a guy out of Austin doing cancellation insurance.
Yes, I know that guy. Cancel that. I love him. And
He
there's probably someone else
he almost came.
Oh yeah?
Really? Oh, sweet.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. And let's see. I think I'll leave it there.
Yeah.